I got this old print of Ian Fleming's James Bond Casino Royale from Thrift Books. For these older books, I love getting the older version. This book is a lot like the movie. The movie actually stayed really true. I was surprised. The 2006 Casino Royale, Daniel Craig's first movie as Bond, it really stayed true to this book. I was surprised by that. And it makes me appreciate the movie even more. This book is really, it's like a character study, just like the movie. I thought the movie was really deconstructing Bond and making him, showing all his flaws and showing him fail over and over again. I thought that was kind of like a postmodern take on Bond when I saw the movie. And I think it kind of is, and it worked. But I realized when I was reading this book that this book, it stayed true to the book a lot. Bond does fail a lot in this book. Of course, in this book, it's not quite as action-packed as the movie. This was the first Bond book. It was written in the 40s, I believe. Probably do another review of this book with more of the facts on hand, but I just want to share what I love about this book. I really liked how it was easy to read. As someone who's watched James Bond my whole life, since I was like 5. I mean, my 6th birthday was staying up all night and having a James Bond marathon with my dad and my brother. So I've been watching James Bond my whole life. The Sean Connery movies, Pierce Brosnan, Roger Moore. We kind of stayed away from the Timothy Dalton ones because at the time they were too violent for me when I was like 6 or 7 or 8, but I've appreciated James Bond my whole life. I've always loved watching the movies, and I was finally able to read this book. I was surprised by how accessible it was and easy to read and pretty easy to follow. As someone who hasn't read for very long, I haven't read many books. This is like all the books I've ever read, basically. It was a really good adventure with Bond coming into the form of what he is for the rest of the books and the movies. So it follows the same story. The movie stays true to it, where he is hired by MI6. He's commissioned by MI6 to go and gamble. He's not going to assassinate anybody or really gather any intelligence. He's really just supposed to gamble and win. And it comes to the point where he actually fails. He loses the game. In the movie, it's Texas Hold'em that he's playing, but in the book, it's baccarat. In the books, that's kind of James Bond's favorite game to play, and that's what he plays in this book. I loved how picking this book up and thinking, am I going to really get into James Bond and read James Bond books now in 2025? Isn't he kind of an antiquated character, in our culture? Isn't he kind of dated and like misogynistic, That's fascinating about Bond, that he's still so popular, but he really is fitting in less and less with our culture. I was kind of hesitant about even getting into Bond, or thinking, is there even a good character there anymore? But I realized that Ian Fleming even recognized that Bond was a flawed character. And even at that time, in the 40s. And it's really cool to see how he is depicted as that imperfect character. And he is really masculine. He's a man's man. He's just like infinitely cool, oozing style, such a good professional and methodical at what he does, but he's not perfect, and he doesn't have to be. And that's what makes the story fun, you know? There's a bunch of gray area with how he treats women and how he just treats everyone around him, how he sees himself. There's a bunch of gray area where it's up to the reader to determine if they have a problem with it or if they want to be like him and to what extent. And that's kind of the fun of it, I realized, through reading this. You know, he's a connoisseur. That's something that was pointed out to me in a YouTube video I watched recently about Bond, is that like part of what makes him interesting is that he's so masculine, but he also like loves food. You know, he's like a foodie. And he's really into fashion too. I thought that was like a movie thing before I read this book. I thought that, you know, James Bond was this secret agent in the books, but the movies made him more of a superficial, like vain kind of guy. But I found from reading this book that he's always been a connoisseur, and he's always liked to dress well, like a gentleman, look good at what he's doing. So all the style from the movies, I realized, was there from the books from the beginning. This book is not as action-packed as the movie, any of the movies really, you know. Sorry, there's an ambulance outside. This book's not as action-packed as the movies. It comes from a time when there weren't many spy novels, you know, so the idea of like Pierce Brosnan surfing a tsunami, you know, through icebergs and glaciers and shooting people while falling out of airplanes and stuff, that you know, those ideas weren't even there yet. So this is just the start of these espionage thrillers, and it shows, you know, it's really, the action is really short and not amazingly choreographed, so to speak, you know. But it doesn't take away from the thrills of the characters and what they go through and what Bond goes through. Especially, the last thing I'll say is the end of this book is really cool. I wouldn't say cool, actually. It's just a really good story. In the movie, I remember seeing Casino Royale in theaters, and after the casino stuff happened, and after his heart stopped, and then he came back to life, and then he got hit in the nuts, tortured by Le Chiffre, and then he like wakes up in Venice, or I think he wakes up in northern Italy with Vesper, and it's like a romance movie all of a sudden. I was like thrown off in the theater. I was like, oh, this is boring now. You know, I was like 13 or something when I saw it in theaters, opening night, and I thought, okay, this is the boring part of the movie. It's just like romance. But then the end, I think I shed a tear in the movie theater when Vesper died, because it was sad. And the book goes even deeper into that sad romance and Bond turning cold afterward. It goes even deeper into that, and the sad love story in this book is even more complex than in the movie, because there's more conversations between Bond and Vesper near the end, where she's so conflicted and she's being like blackmailed, you know. The book just goes deeper into that, and it's so sad. And I think the book makes it even more relatable to any guy reading the book, how Bond feels about it, and his emotional detachment, and him needing to keep some distance from Vesper is like a dramatized version of what a lot of men go through in relationships, especially in this modern world where, people are dating a lot and just, maybe getting into a really serious relationship that suddenly ends and things are just patchy and flaky and complicated. So I loved how sad it was. It was really sad near the end of this book. I feel, you feel for Vesper and Bond, that they're tangled up in this mess, and the love is messy. They want to be in a relationship, but there's mixed signals. Talk about mixed signals. I mean, she's being like, practically threatened. Her life is threatened. She's blackmailed. And he has a mission to do, but he's also in love with her and willing to drop that for her. But at the end of the book, after everything comes to pass, just like in the movie, she dies, and spoiler alert, if you haven't seen the movie, sorry. And he is left as even more of the Bond that we see in the rest of the movies. He's developed that character of this womanizing, globe-trotting secret agent. And so I highly recommend checking out this book if you like the Casino Royale movie. If you like any of the Bond movies, you should read this book. I want to read more Bond novels, and I've heard the comics are also really good. So I'm going to check those out, but thanks for following along and listening, and hit like and subscribe if you want to check out more book reviews and other things I'm curious about and things I'm reviewing. See you next time.